Today, as promised, we're looking at one of the Steven Universe comic book one-shots rather than an issue of the old ongoing series. We're looking at Steven Universe Anti-Gravity, which is called a Cartoon Network original on the cover, which makes me think that this one was meant to be a bit more official and maybe a bit more canon than some of the other comic book stuff. And reading it, I can definitely believe that. And you're going to be surprised to hear this, considering how upbeat I sound right now. But this was a Ronaldo story. And it was a great one. It starts out with the Gems making breakfast, or rather Steven's making breakfast and showing Amethyst how to make pancakes. And one of the pancakes floats above the pan for a little longer than it should. Meanwhile, Ronaldo has set up a makeshift alien communication device, sort of like an alien CB radio, that he's using to try to communicate with extraterrestrials. And even when his dad comes down with an illness that puts him in bed for a while, probably not COVID, but it made me think of COVID, of course, because the times. He sits at this alien radio rather than helping Petey around the shop, leaving him to do everything by himself and building up some resentment between the two. But he does seemingly communicate with something, receiving a garbled signal, thinking that it's aliens at about the same time that other things around the town start to float too. Now, this does mean that Ronaldo has seemingly encountered evidence of something before anyone else has. Like, we're seeing things start to float, little things, but like, we have no reason to assume that that's something in space doing it, aside from this signal that he's intercepted. So when he runs to the Gems to tell them, leaping to conclusions, that he's communicated with aliens, and now they're going to take him up to their ship to be their ambassador, and then he starts floating too. Technically, he has made them aware of this thing having its origin in space before they would have known that. But because he jumped to conclusions, they have to waste time rescuing him and then wrestling him down to the ground and insisting that he stay home to protect his brother rather than getting himself involved in a situation that he doesn't understand. But it is in part because he did make the connection to space that they recognize that it's probably a damaged Gem satellite. A really old piece of technology that used to use a specific kind of warp to tractor beam core samples up into space for analysis to see if a planet was right for colonization. That it's probably this warp-based tractor beam that's causing the gravity anomalies and not whatever that weirdo Stan was doing under his mystery shack. So they take Lion up to the moon to get a look at some of the Gem satellites in orbit, and they find the malfunctioning satellite. They make their way over, and when it starts to malfunction even further, its warp heating up and focusing into a laser that will destroy the town in a few minutes. It's a suggestion from Ronaldo, who is once again on his makeshift communication device, that leads them to shut it down just in time to stop it. It's very possible that if Ronaldo hadn't done the things that he did in this story, they wouldn't have gotten here and done these things fast enough to save the town. But we also don't 100% know that, because Steven did spend a bit of time here that they could have spent figuring things out, accommodating Ronaldo and trying not to make him feel bad, much like he did for most of Ronaldo. The difference is here, by the end of this issue, Ronaldo has recognized the recklessness in his behavior. He's taken it to heart that he acted on incomplete evidence. And when Steven says, were you really going to be abducted by aliens and leave without telling Petey and the rest of your family goodbye? He seems hurt by that, as if he hadn't thought of that, and it would have genuinely pained him to do that. And whenever Petey says, can't you help with the shop? Why can't you make yourself useful? Ronaldo keeps insisting that he is making himself useful by doing the things that he prefers to do, which leads to the revelation by the time he's in contact with them on the satellite later, that while he does want to be in the center of whatever happens, of whatever crazy thing happens, because he's the one who cared about it, and therefore he feels like he should be involved in it when it occurs. He deserves to be involved in it when it occurs. he really does care. He wants to find aliens and help aliens find Earth because he genuinely believes that that would be a good thing for mankind. There's more nuance to his behavior than him just being self-centered. The reason he leaps on things so quickly without getting all of the evidence first is because he's just so anxious for something exciting to happen that he can be a part of. And so in the end, seeing that he's learned something and seeing that he did genuinely help them, even if he did hinder them a bit too, Stephen tells the townspeople that he helped, and he gets a bit of a win. They carry him off as a hero. And it was a really cool ending. And I just kept thinking through the entire thing, why couldn't we have gotten a story like this instead of Ronaldo? Because the basic story beats of Ronaldo gets really enthusiastic about a thing that he doesn't really understand, and then Stephen has to accommodate him for a while the gems clown on him a little bit, because that did happen here too. Of course, he's Ronaldo. And then, in the end, Stephen tells him off, and he, in the case of the episode, seemingly learned something, but here genuinely did. They're basically the same. But here, there was like actual real character development for him that I believe and that I feel went in a positive direction. And he wasn't nearly as infuriating here. While there were definitely some aspects to the art in this one that I thought were a little weak, the character designs were a little simplistic, they did a really good job with the characters' expressions. You can really tell what Ronaldo is feeling, and it helps. Not only that, but they snuck in a B-plot about Stephen talking with the gems about how he feels like he has to take everything seriously and how he feels bad that he didn't when he first started helping them on missions. During which the gems acknowledge that one of the things they love about him is that he can go about his business without taking things too seriously, and that he shouldn't have to carry all of this himself. Wherein Stephen kind of makes the decision that he should keep carrying it because it's what's best for everybody. And it's one of those kinds of conversations that, like, the characters should have had in the show. Like, if Stephen had conversations with the gems where they didn't want him to have so much weighing on him, but he had decided to take it on himself anyway, that would have helped so much with my opinion of the gems by the end of the show, when Stephen was having breakdown after breakdown, and it was mostly just because they had always just treated him like his mom. Never really treated him like the kid he was. Here it shows that they were thinking of that, but they were letting him make his own choices, which is so much better. There's also a lot of humor in here. Amethyst in particular was written very in character, and there's this one sequence early on, relatively early on, when Ronaldo's being pulled up like a bunch of stuff in town by the warp tractor beam, and they're trying to reach him to pull him back down, and Stephen just runs up to Garnet like, hey, throw me, and she just does it without thinking. And then when Pearl's like, why'd you do that, she just shrugs. It was very funny, and felt like the kind of goofy stuff we would get in the first act of one of the episodes in the show. This felt like it could have been an episode in the show. Maybe it was a little tiny bit overlong for that, but it felt like it would have worked as an episode in the show, and worked really well. And I liked it a lot. And it had lore stuff in it. We got the introduction of this satellite, which fits right in with the technology of the time that it's supposed to come from. We got to visit the moon base again. It was just all around a fantastic story, and I highly recommend it. Especially if you're someone who feels like they could have done a better job writing Ronaldo in the show and wished you had seen that. Because this is what his writing could have been in the show. Like, I had thought of this prior to him saying it, but he says it by the end of the issue. He calls himself an ambassador to alien life or something along those lines. But it got me thinking, why couldn't that have been what Ronaldo was? Like, in this comic, it seems like he hasn't realized yet that the gems are aliens, which I guess makes sense. Did he ever acknowledge them as aliens rather than some terrestrial supernatural thing? I don't even remember. It's not important, though. That's not the point. He seems to consider the gems as something that, while weird, they belong here. So they don't hold his interest the way that, like, Life from the Stars does. So when it started to become apparent that that's what he was interested in that might be causing him trouble, why couldn't the Gems and Steven have started to let him in on stuff little by little and let him be an ambassador between them and the people of the town? Someone who they told just enough that he could tell the others just enough that they would accept the Gems a little bit more and understand a little bit more what the Gems were getting up to, rather than being so secretive all the time. They could have let Ronaldo in little by little, making him their ambassador, and then later, when everything happened in future with Earth and Homeworld having limited relations with each other, Ronaldo could have been a proper ambassador between the Gems and humanity. He could have felt like he was a part of something important while also helping, which seems to be all he wants. It would have been perfect. And instead we got stuff like Rocknaldo, which you guys know how much I hate Rocknaldo. It just feels like sometimes the crew were more concerned with making Ronaldo a joke than they were making him a character. And I think that's what frustrates me the most about him, because this comic proves that he had potential to be more than that. And I think what frustrates me the most about it is that wasn't always the case. It's not like he was universally the butt of the joke in the show. There were entire scenes where it was clear that he was meant to be more than that. That they were trying to do stuff with him. And they were so good at making other characters feel real without giving them a ton of screen time. If it had been more clear from the very beginning that their intention with Ronaldo was that he never be taken seriously, I don't think I'd have the problem with him that I do. I don't want to harp on the crew, though. Like, their treatment of Ronaldo is one of the things I feel like they failed at hardest. I feel like they still succeeded at way more things than they failed at, let's be clear about that. It also doesn't help that I see a bit of myself in Ronaldo, in some of the things that he does, right? I don't know, it feels like the potential was there, and this comic capitalizes on it in ways that the show just either never did or never had time to do. Which is the same thing, but there's a nuance. You get what I'm saying. Anyway, read this comic. If you can get your hands on this comic, read it. It might be online. If you ask me, I might tell you where you can find it online. Not gonna make any promises, though. Wink, wink. Yeah, what did you think of Steven Universe Anti-Gravity, though, if you have read it? Guys, let's get a discussion going in the comments section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description, but either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.